Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
Our first guest tonight is the most powerful movie star in the world. Please welcome the one, the only Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise is one of the biggest action stars on Earth, but things used to be very different. How did a poor, aspiring Catholic priest become worth over $500 million and one of the most powerful action stars in Hollywood? Was it sheer determination or just amazing luck? This is the unbelievable story of Tom Cruise's rise from nomad loser to ultimate action hero. One milestone movie would change Cruise's career forever, and clearly marked a turning point in his Hollywood life. It was a career that started very differently from what we know today, and other early films gave clues as to the huge high-octane action we'd see from Cruise on screen, even if behind the cameras spending time with the actors become increasingly mission impossible. More on that later. But before he'd made any movies, Cruise had a difficult upbringing. He also had a rebellious streak, and I'll let you know what maverick behaviour he did to get kicked out of preschool later. But did you know he was at 15 schools in 14 years, and he had a dad who beat his family? They were devout Catholics, with Cruise himself on a path to be less CIA agent and more saint, as he took classes at a seminary. But it was acting that let him escape his difficult childhood, and in school, he started this as early as 9 years old with an improvised play that impressed his drama teacher. I'm not sure if he did all of his own stunts for that one. Years later in high school, he'd discover booze, and this got him banished from both his promising careers as a priest and as an American footballer, not at the same time. He wasn't caught doing anything before his school's production of Guys and Dolls, at least anything that stopped him from taking a starring role and setting himself up for a life of pretending to be somebody else. Big hair, big phones, and big movies are what defined the 80s. Cruise was present with all these, and there was one particular 80s movie that would propel him to superstardom without quite cementing himself as the do-it-yourself action hero. That would come in the next decade. Before his bankable star status, Cruise started his acting life working as a busboy in New York. Then after all the dishes in the Big Apple were cleaned, he moved to LA to become a TV actor. He went one better and got himself a supporting role in the military student movie Taps, after impressing so much as an extra. At this point, he hadn't yet felt the need for speed, and directors were looking at him for more dramatic roles, like Francis Ford Coppola's The Outsiders, which featured arguably the world's most handsome ensemble cast, with Rob Lowe, Matt Dillon, Patrick Swayze, Ralph Macchio, and Emilio Estevez all getting a break in this coming-of-age drama. For his role as Steve Randall, Cruise removed a cap from his front tooth to match the tough look of his greaser character, which showed he still had a long way to go before getting the perfect grin to match the perfect 21st century stunts behind and in front of the camera. Risky Business would help with that and see Cruise in his first standout role, and what better way to stand out than to lip-sync in just a shirt and Y-fronts. RuPaul would be proud. And Ray-Ban was very happy indeed, as the leading star managed to single-handedly save the sunglasses company from going under. This was one of the first times that Cruise insisted on doing his own stunts, when the Porsche 928 met his watery grave. This would start a trend of the actor learning new skills for roles, which got taken up to Mach 11 into the next phase of his career. But before that, it was time for this ex-student of the Priesthood to make his first milestone career-changing appearance. Top Gun. This would lay down the path for his action-filled future in his professional and personal life. 1986 was a big year for Cruise. 2 landmark movies with him as the poster boy were about to land. They were very different films, but both would catapult what, up to now, had been a good-looking, charismatic lead to something much bigger.
If I have entertained you at all, I thank you. I thank you.
The Colour of Money saw him alongside Hollywood royalty and Paul Newman as a pool hustler directed by Martin Scorsese. But a significant thing about this movie is that it showcased his ability to pick up skills to show off on screen. To prepare for his role, he underwent extensive training with professional pool players to perfect his skills, which meant most of what you see is real, and that amazingly included shots that any pro would be proud of. Also, excuse this tangent for a fun fact, but the video game Doom is named after this scene.
What you got in there?
In here?
Doom.
Yeah, let's play.
I'm not sure if his Doom skills match the pool skills he learned for the movie. These days, he's doing a similar thing with magic, performing sleight of hand tricks for fun in Mission Impossible, as well as making people disappear when he starts talking about his religion. Back to 1986, and the other movie that helped his career jet to another level was Top Gun. Now, it's worth mentioning that Tom Cruise wasn't getting inside F-18 cockpits during flights like he would in Maverick 36 years later. Instead, this movie wasn't so much about the realism as it was about the action and homoeroticism, even if most of that action was filmed on the ground in front of rear projection. That being said, Cruise still had extensive flight training. He even flew with the Blue Angels, the US Navy's flight demonstration squadron, to get a feel for the intense experience of flying high-speed jets. This would help him build a bespoke training course for the new recruits for the sequel, because we all need hobbies in our free time. Tom Cruise was now one of the biggest stars on the planet, and he'd used this platform to throw himself into more and more intense roles. The situation behind the camera was about to get just as intense. For the next 10 years, Cruise would establish himself as not just a fan favourite, but a critic's favourite as well. Cocktail was an exception, but we'll let that slide because the bar juggling tricks were cool, and of course, Cruise learnt them all himself, which was obviously worth it, as he could easily apply for a job at his local TGI Fridays. The movies he made at this time make for an impressive list, leading up to one that would allow Cruise to take control over his career and steer his path to the canyon-leaping, death-avoiding actor we know today. In the late 80s and early 90s, we were treated to Rain Man, where Cruise starred with Dustin Hoffman to send autistic people to casinos worldwide whether they liked it or not. The movie won the Academy Award for Best Picture, with more acting acclaim for Cruise. Around this time, he married his first wife, Mimi Rogers, who introduced him to the religion that must not be named. This would influence his future relationships, and not in the best way. But despite a divorce from Rogers in 1990, everything on screen was going from strength to strength. Born on the 4th of July, earned him his first Oscar nomination for the role of Vietnam War veteran Ron Kovic in this Oliver Stone epic. Days of Thunder was Top Gun with Cars, co-starring Nicole Kidman. The two would reunite again in the epic romantic Ron Howard adventure Far and Away. They would also reunite several times more as the two married just months after Days of Thunder was released, and also months after Cruise's first divorce was sealed. More dramatic roles followed for Cruise when he couldn't handle the truth in A Few Good Men.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Next, another role as a lawyer followed in The Firm, with another blood-sucking role after as a vampire in the aptly named Interview with the Vampire, alongside heart-throbbing waiting Brad Pitt. The next role would be the pivotal one. While behind the scenes Cruise's sequel Marriage was going the way of most sequels and getting critically panned, especially by Kidman, who refused to change her Catholic upbringing for a husband. If only there was an aspiring priest that could help. In 1996, with chaos in his private life, Cruise made the choice to have more control over his professional life and buck an industry trend to reach another gear as an action star. 1991's Terminator 2 Judgment Day introduced the world to the first fully CG character, and 1993's Jurassic Park used this new technology to help bring dinosaurs to life. Suddenly, Hollywood was all about CG-driven blockbusters, and the industry lapped it up like a hungry cat. Independence Day, Twister, and Armageddon were all launched in the mid-90s, and the spectacle was just as big, or sometimes bigger, as the movie's stars. This is a trend that still remains today, with the CG fests of Marvel and insert any action movie here. Meanwhile, Cruise was looking towards his own future and decided to take matters into his own hands by producing a film that would be a blockbuster, but one that would also have strong cinematic qualities. He teamed up with Brian De Palma to make the first Mission Impossible, and while the director was in charge of steering the ship, Cruise was ultimately calling the shots on the movie. Sounds like most of his partnerships. One thing the two agreed on more than anything was embracing practical effects and stunts, as the first Mission Impossible turned its back on Hollywood's newest trend in favour of nail-biting sequences that could mostly be completed practically, of course, ignoring the ridiculous train sequence at the end of the first movie. Cruise had an influence on his own career path before Mission Impossible, but it was during and after this film that he became even more proactive, not just in what kinds of films he would make, but how they would be made. His teaming up with Cameron Crowe on 1996's Jerry Maguire was so fruitful that when they got the gang back together for 2001's Vanilla Sky, Cruise produced that movie and helped creatively shape it. Even with the nail already in the coffin for the Cruiseman partnership, for Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, the ridiculously long production was a team effort between Cruise, Kubrick and Kidman. This was to start a trend that would end up with critical success, as well as a happy bank manager for Cruise. At least at the movies, his divorce bills were mounting and weren't getting reduced anytime soon. Mission Impossible has changed Tom Cruise's career for the worst, is a valid argument, especially if you like dramatic acting.
What you are? A vampire gone insane that pollutes its own bed?
He mainly stars in fast-paced blockbuster flicks now, but even at the turn of the millennium, this wasn't completely the case. Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia earned him another Oscar nomination. Michael Mann's Collateral was more thriller than it was action. Then there were Lions for Lambs and Valkyrie, which ultimately put the nails in Cruise's dramatic coffin, as they were about as well received as a U2 album landing in someone's iTunes. Meanwhile, Cruise was getting a lot of joy from building a franchise in which each Mission Impossible release had its own unique identity. Cruise made a concerted effort to go in a very different way for Mission Impossible 2, not only hiring John Woo to direct, but pushing him to make the film his own. This trend would continue on every Mission sequel, even when Christopher McQuarrie became the first director to direct more than one Mission movie, when the director returned for Mission Impossible Fallout after crafting the classical, almost throwback Rogue Nation. He did so because Cruise had told him to change up his style and create a different kind of MI movie. Mission accomplished, and made the franchise more like the American James Bond in that respect, minus the casual sexism.
Link, say goodbye to Felix. Man talk.
Cruise has always steered Mission Impossible towards success, letting top filmmakers like J.J. Abrams and Brad Bird bring their own passions and perspectives to the table, resulting in diverse films. And in the most extreme circumstances, when Cruise's career was spiralling downwards due to a couple of mediocre films we've already looked at, and another messy religious-related divorce, 2011's Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol brought him back to the top of the world's tallest building. Cruise has essentially now CG-proofed his career by continuing to push jaw-dropping practical effects in movies that put the audience first and succeed at the box office. In an age in which the term movie star seems to be fading quickly, and CG is used in Hollywood as much as plastic surgery, Cruise has evolved into one of the few performers who is able to greenlight a massive movie alone. It helps he's probably producing it as well. Would he still be as successful or viable a star had he continued starring in boundary-pushing dramas from exciting filmmakers? Probably not. And that's why the first Mission Impossible is such a massive turning point. Not forgetting all the movies that came before it, which lit the fire to get Cruise doing all sorts of fun things on screen for real.